The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent as Ambassador Katie Morgan walked toward the central platform. Her footsteps echoed against the polished stone floor.
Got this.
And she could feel the eyes of 47 different species watching her every move. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with barely hidden contempt, and a few with something that might have been pity. She had been doing this job for 12 years now. 12 years of fighting for humanity's voice in a chamber that never truly wanted to hear it. 12 years of watching her people be treated as second-class members of a community they had given everything to join. Today would be different. Today would be the last time High Counselor Veteran of the Thessari sat upon his elevated throne, his insect-like body clicking and shifting as he prepared to deliver the council's verdict. The Thessari had ruled this body for over 1,000 years, and they had grown comfortable in their power. Too comfortable, Katie thought. The matter before us is simple, Veteran announced, his mandibles producing sounds that the translation devices converted into flat, emotionless words. The human colony on Kepler 4 for 2b has requested military assistance against Varathi raiders. The Council has voted. 13 species have voted against intervention. 8 have voted in favor. The request is denied. Katie felt her stomach drop, even though she had expected this outcome. 3 million people lived on Kepler 4 forward to be. 3 million men. Women and children who had built homes and farms and schools on a distant world. The Varathi had already destroyed 2 smaller settlements in the sector, killing everyone they found. "May I speak?" Katie asked. Her voice steady, despite the anger burning in her chest. Veteran waved one of his forearms in a gesture of permission. "You may, Ambassador Morgan." Though the decision has been made, Katie turned to face the assembled delegates. She saw the Mandari, tall and graceful, their silver skin reflecting the chamber's lights. She saw the Kelvoth squat and powerful, their stone-like faces impossible to read. She saw dozens of other species, some she had worked with closely, others she barely knew. 3 million people, she said. That is how many humans live on Kepler 4 Fort to be. They are farmers and teachers and doctors. They have children who play in fields under an alien sun, and this council has just decided that their lives are not worth protecting. The council must consider the greater good, Representative Morith of the Kelvoth replied. Engaging the Varathi would risk a wider conflict. I see. Katie nodded slowly. Tell me, Representative, how many times has the council mobilized its fleet in the past 10 years? Morith shifted uncomfortably, but did not answer. 17 times, Katie continued. 17 times this council decided that military action was necessary. When the Sari had a border dispute with the Voran Empire, 300 ships were deployed within a week. When the Mondari faced a refugee crisis that threatened to overwhelm their outer colonies, the council provided escorts and protection without hesitation. When the Kelvoth needed help defending their mining operations, help was given. She paused, letting her words sink in. But when humans ask for help, suddenly the risks are too great. Suddenly the costs are too high. Suddenly, our lives are acceptable losses. Ambassador Morgan, Veteran said, his tone carrying a warning. You are out of line. And no, High Counselor. I am simply stating facts that everyone in this chamber already knows. Katie straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. For 112 years, humanity has been a member of this council. We have shared our technology freely. We have sent our soldiers to die in wars that had nothing to do with us. We have given and given and given, asking only to be treated as equals in return. She looked directly at Veteran. We were fools to expect that would ever happen. The chamber erupted in murmurs and whispers. Katie waited until the noise died down before speaking again. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies withdraw from the Galactic Council. Every treaty we have signed, every agreement we have made, every promise we have given, is hereby dissolved. Humanity will no longer beg for scraps at your table. Now the chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates rose from their seats, shouting in a dozen different languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the flood of words. Katie ignored all of it and walked toward the exit. Admiral Daniel Hayes met her in the corridor outside. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had served alongside alien soldiers for 30 years, had earned medals from species that now looked at humanity with disdain. "It is done?" he asked. "It is done." Katie suddenly felt exhausted, the weight of what she had just done pressing down on her shoulders. "We need to get our people off Kepler 44b. We need to do it ourselves because no one else will help." Hayes nodded. "I have already sent the orders. Every human ship in Council space is preparing to move. We can have the evacuation complete within 48 hours. Good." Katie started walking toward the human section of the station. "And Hayes, make sure our people take everything with them. Everything we brought, everything we built, everything we shared. If the Council does not value our contributions, they do not get to keep them." The Admiral allowed himself a small smile. "Already done, Ambassador. By this time tomorrow, there will not be a single piece of human technology left in Council hands." Over the next 2 days, humanity vanished from galactic society like a ghost fading at dawn. Human engineers shut down the relay stations they had built and maintained. Human doctors packed up the medical equipment they had donated to alien hospitals. Human scientists deleted the research they had shared with Council. Universities dot the evacuation of Kepler 44b went smoothly, thanks to the skill of human pilots and the bravery of human soldiers who held off Vorathi scouts long enough for the civilian transports to escape. 3 million people were saved, not by the Council that had abandoned them, but by their own kind. High Counselor Vethrin watched the human departure with something close to amusement. He gathered the remaining Council members and assured them that this was merely a tantrum. A temporary display of emotion from a young and immature species. "They will return," he said confidently. "Humans are too dependent on galactic trade, to connect it to our networks, to reliant on our protection. Within a year, they will come crawling back, begging for readmission." Several delegates nodded in agreement. Others were not so sure but kept their doubts to themselves. None of them understood what they had lost. None of them realized how much of their comfortable existence had been built on human work, human innovation, human sacrifice, but they would learn the galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity stopped asking for respect and simply walked away, and it would not be pretty. 6 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and Commander Lisa Park was beginning to understand what true satisfaction felt like. She sat in her office on Haven Station, the largest human outpost in their newly established territory, reading reports from across the galaxy. Each report brought news of another system failing, another crisis emerging, another species suddenly realizing how much they had depended on human expertise. It was not revenge, she told herself. It was simply consequence. The first signs of trouble had appeared within weeks of the human withdrawal. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly became unreliable. Ships arrived late or not at all. Cargo spoiled in transit. Schedules that had once been precise down to the minute became meaningless guesses. The problem was the relay network. Humans had built it, humans had maintained it, and humans had taken it with them when they left. The technology itself was not particularly complex, but it required constant adjustment and careful management. The Council's species had never bothered to learn how it worked because they had always assumed humans would be there to handle it. Now they were learning the cost of that. Assumption Kevin Moore. Lisa's assistant entered the office with a tablet in his hand. He was young, barely 30 years old, but he had a sharp mind and a good heart. Lisa had come to rely on him heavily over the past months. The Kethmari grain shipment finally arrived at its destination, he reported. 3 weeks late. Lisa winced. Casualties: 200,000 dead from famine. Another 500,000 in critical condition. Kevin's voice was flat, professional, but Lisa could see the pain in his eyes. The Kethmari are blaming us, of course. Of course they are. Lisa leaned back in her chair. Did they ever ask us to train their technicians on the relay systems? 14 times over the past 60 years, they refused each time. Said our methods were too primitive for their advanced civilization to bother with. Lisa nodded slowly. She remembered those refusals well. She had been present for several of them. watching alien diplomats dismiss human offers of help with barely concealed contempt. Now those same diplomats were watching their people starve because ships could not navigate without human algorithms. The situation was even worse on the borders of Council space. Without human warships patrolling the outer sectors, the Varathi had grown bold. They struck colonies with impunity. Knowing that the Council fleet was too slow and too disorganized to respond in time, Admiral Neil Hayes commanded the human defense force from his flagship, the Constellation. He had established a protective perimeter around human territory, and not a single Varathi raider had managed to penetrate it. But he received requests for help from Council species almost daily now. The Mandari are asking again, his communications officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, told him one morning. They want us to escort their refugee ships through Varathi territory. They say, thousands will die if we do not help. Hayes stared at the message on his screen for a long moment. The Mandaria had been among the loudest voices, calling for humanity to be denied a permanent seat on the High Council. Their representative had personally argued that human colonies were expendable assets, not worth the cost of protection. Tell them we are fully committed to defending human interests, Hayes said finally. We do not have ships available for escort duty. Maria hesitated. Sir, there are children on those ships. I know. Hayes closed his eyes briefly. And there were children on Kepler 44b when the Mandar voted to let them die. I am not refusing out of spite, Lieutenant. I am refusing because we genuinely cannot afford to spread our forces thin. We have our own people to protect first. It was a hard truth, but it was still the truth. Humanity had always been outnumbered in the galaxy. They had survived by being clever, by being efficient, by making every ship and every soldier count. They could not save everyone, no matter how much they might want to. Back on Haven Station, Dr. Nathan Cole was having a different kind of argument. Nathan was a xenobiologist, one of the foremost experts on alien physiology and human space. He had spent decades building relationships with species across the galaxy, learning their languages, understanding their cultures, treating their sick and wounded. He had believed, truly believed, that those relationships meant something. Now he was not so sure. We cannot just watch them die, he said, standing before the Human Council in their makeshift assembly hall. I understand why we left. I supported the decision. But there is a difference between walking away and actively refusing to help people in need. Katie Morgan, who had returned to Haven after delivering her farewell to the Galactic Council, listened to his words with a tired expression. She had not slept well in months. The weight of 3 million lives saved and millions more lost kept her awake at night. Nathan, I respect your compassion, she said. But what you are asking is impossible. If we start helping Council species, where do we stop? Do we help the ones who voted against Kepler? Do we help the ones who called us inferior? Do we help the ones who treated us like servants for a century? We help anyone who needs it, Nathan replied. That is what makes us better than them. And what happens when helping them gets our own people killed. Admiral Hayes appeared on the view screen, joining the meeting from the Constellation. We tried being generous, Doctor. We tried being helpful. We tried being the good neighbors who asked for nothing in return. And what did it get us? Contempt. Betrayal. Our colonies left to burn while the Council debated whether we were worth saving. Nathan had no answer to that. He knew Hayes was right, at least partially. But he also knew that becoming cold and selfish would cost humanity something precious, something that could not be measured in ships or soldiers. The debate continued for hours, and then for days. Human society was splitting along new lines, with some calling for complete isolation and others arguing for selective intervention. There were no easy answers, no clear paths forward. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to fall apart. The Varathi launched a major offensive against the Mandari homeworld, destroying 3 orbital stations and killing millions. The Thessaries struggled to maintain order as their client species began to question their leadership. The Kelvoth retreated from the outer reach entirely, abandoning mining operations that had operated for centuries. On the Council floor, blame flew in every direction. Some accused humanity of sabotage, claiming that the systems they left behind had been deliberately corrupted. Others argued that the Council had brought this upon itself through arrogance and short-sightedness. High Counselor Vethrin tried to maintain control, but his authority was crumbling. Species that had once obeyed without question were now demanding answers he could not provide. The unified front that had seemed so powerful when humanity was present had revealed itself to be fragile and fractured, and somewhere in the darkness between stars. Human ships kept watch over their own territory, protecting their own people. Waiting to see what would happen next, they would not have to wait long. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy was burning. Katie Morgan stood before the main view screen on Haven Station. Watching footage from the Thessari border, Varathi warships moved through space like hungry predators, destroying everything in their path. The once mighty Thessari fleet, reduced by months of constant fighting, struggled to hold the line. "How many ships do they have now?" she asked quietly. Kevin Moore checked his tablet. "Our scouts count at least 400 Varathi vessels in that sector alone. The Thessari have maybe 150 ships capable of combat. The rest of the Council fleet is scattered across a dozen different conflicts." Katie closed her eyes. When humanity had been part of the Council, they had maintained peace through constant vigilance. Human patrol ships had covered more territory than any other species, not because they were the largest fleet, but because they were the most efficient. Now that coverage was gone, and the Varathi had noticed in another part of the station. Dr. Nathan Cole was treating a patient he never expected to see. The young Mondari female had been brought in by a rescue ship that had found her drifting in an escape pod near the border of human space. She was badly injured, suffering from radiation burns and dehydration, but she would survive. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her silver skin pale and cracked. "Your people hate us." Nathan adjusted her fore and checked her vital signs. "I do not hate anyone, and my oath as a doctor does not allow me to let someone die when I can help them." "The Council let your people die?" "On Kepler. Yes, they did." Nathan sat down beside her bed. "And that was wrong. But 2 wrongs do not make a right, as my grandmother used to say." The Mondari female was silent for a moment. "I voted against helping your colony. I was a junior delegate then. I thought I was doing what was best for my people, and now I understand that what is best for one species is rarely best for everyone. I was a fool." She turned her head to look at him directly. "Your people were the only ones who tried to keep the galaxy together. We were too proud to see it." Nathan had no response to that. He simply continued his work, doing what he had always done, just one patient at a time. Meanwhile, High Counselor Vethrin was facing the greatest crisis of his long career. The emergency session of the Council had been going on for 3 days, and tempers were fraying. Species that had once been allies were now accusing each other of treachery and cowardice. "We must reach out to the humans," Vethrin announced, his voice tired and strained. "We must apologize, offer them whatever they want, bring them back into the fold." "They will not come," Representative Sale of the Thessari Junior Council replied. She was young for her position, but she had always been more thoughtful than her elders. Ambassador Morgan was clear when she left. "We burned that bridge when we abandoned Kepler, then we will build a new bridge. We will offer them seats on the High Council, full voting rights, equal status with the founding species." Sale looked at him with something like pity. "Would you have offered that before they left, High Counselor? Or did it take our worlds burning for you to see their worth?" Vethrin had no answer. On the Constellation, Admiral Hayes was reviewing intelligence reports with his senior officers. The situation was worse than the public knew. The Varathi were not just raiding anymore. They were conquering. 3 Council species had already fallen under their control. Their populations enslaved or scattered. "They are going to hit Thesser Prime next," Lieutenant Maria Santos said, pointing at the holographic map. "Their fleet movements make it clear. They want to cut off the head of the Council." "The Thessari still have the largest fleet," another officer observed. "Can they hold?" Hayes shook his head slowly. "Not against these numbers. Not without support. And the rest of the Council is too busy fighting their own fires to send help." Sir Maria said carefully, If this or Prime falls, the Council will collapse completely. There will be nothing left to hold the galaxy together. I am aware of that, Lieutenant. So what do we do? Hayes stared at the map for a long moment. He thought about all the times he had fought alongside the sorry soldiers, the battles they had won together, the friends he had made and lost. He thought about the vote that had abandoned Kepler, the contempt in Vethren's voice when he dismissed human concerns. He thought about what kind of people humanity wanted to be. Call a meeting of the fleet commanders, he said finally, and get me a secure line to Ambassador Morgan. The meeting that followed would shape the future of the galaxy. Katie Morgan appeared on the view screen, her face drawn and tired, but her eyes still sharp. She listened as Hayes laid out the situation, the numbers, the timeline. If we do nothing, Thesser Prime falls within a month, Hayes concluded. The Council collapses. The Varathi become the dominant power in the galaxy. And eventually, they will come for us too. Katie was quiet for a long moment. You want to go back? After everything they did to us? I want to save people who are about to die. Some of them were our enemies. Some of them were our friends. Most of them were just ordinary beings who had no say in what their leaders decided. And if we save them, what then? Do we go back to being their servants? They're convenient protectors who can be discarded when we are no longer useful. Hayes shook his head. No, we go back as something new, something they've never seen before. We show them what humanity is capable of when we are not held back by their rules and their limitations. We show them why they should have treated us as equals all along. Dr. Nathan Cole spoke up from the corner of the room where he had been listening quietly. There's another reason to help them. A simpler one. What is that, Doctor? Katie asked. Because it is the right thing to do. Because we are better than they were to us. Because if we let millions die when we could have saved them, we lose something we can never get back. He met her eyes through the screen. We become exactly what they always thought we were. Small, selfish, unworthy. Katie Morgan looked at the faces around her. She saw determination, fear, hope, and doubt. She saw the weight of a decision that would change everything. How long do we have to prepare? She asked finally. Admiral Hayes allowed himself a small smile. The fleet has been ready for 2 years, Ambassador. We have just been waiting for the order. Katie nodded slowly. Then give the order, Admiral. Humanity is going back to the galaxy. But this time, we go on our own terms. The sky above the Sur Prime was filled with fire. 300 Varathi warships had surrounded the Suri homeworld, their weapons raining destruction upon the ancient cities below. Orbital stations that had stood for 1,000 years were reduced to burning wreckage. Billions of the Sari watched helplessly as their civilization crumbled around them. High Counselor. Vethren stood in the command center of the Planetary Defense Network, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed. The Thesari had fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Their allies had sent what ships they could spare, but it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. High Counselor, one of his aides said, we should evacuate. The bunkers in the northern continent can hold for several weeks. And then what? Vethren asked quietly. Watch from underground, as everything we built is destroyed? No, if this is to be the end, I will face it here. The aide had no response to that. They all knew the truth. This was the end of the Thesari dominance, the end of the Galactic Council as it had existed for millennia. Whatever came next would be something new, something strange, something shaped by defeat and desperation. And then the sensors detected something impossible. Sir, the tactical officer said, his voice trembling, new contacts emerging from hyperspace. 96 vessels, Varathi reinforcements. Vethren felt his heart sink even further. No, sir. The officer looked up, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. They are human. Aboard the Constellation, Admiral Daniel Hayes stood at the center of his bridge, watching the battle unfold on the main view screen. The Varathi fleet was massive, 3 times the size of his own force, and they held all the advantages of position and preparation, but they had never fought humans before. Not really. They had fought Council fleets that included human ships bound by Council rules and Council strategies. They had never faced a human force operating without restrictions that was about to change. Not all ships. This is Admiral Hayes, he said calmly. Commence Operation Homecoming. The first wave of the attack was invisible. Stealth ships. Tiny vessels barely large enough to hold a crew of 3 had been positioned throughout the system hours before the main fleet arrived. Now they activated their electronic warfare packages. Flooding Varathi communication channels with noise and false signals, the Varathi commanders suddenly found themselves unable to coordinate. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began to drift, unsure of their orders. Automated defense systems started targeting friendly vessels, fooled by spoofed identification codes. Before the Varathi could adapt, the second wave struck. Human carriers had been developed in secret during the 2 years of isolation. They carried hundreds of autonomous drones, weapons that the old Council would never have permitted. The drones swarmed through the gaps in the Varathi formation. Too small to target effectively, too numerous to ignore. They did not carry heavy weapons. They did not need to. Each drone was designed to attach itself to enemy ships and disable critical systems. Engine controls, shield generators, weapons targeting computers. One by one, Varathi vessels found themselves crippled, still alive but unable to fight, and then the main fleet arrived. Human warships were smaller than their Varathi counterparts, but they were faster and more maneuverable. Human crews were trained to think creatively, to adapt to changing situations, to exploit any weakness they could find. They had spent a century learning how to win battles against superior numbers. And now they put those lessons into practice. The Battle of Thesser Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 230 Varathi ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 70 had fled into hyperspace, their commanders shocked and demoralized by a defeat they had never imagined possible. Human losses were significant, but survivable. 3 ships destroyed and another 40 damaged. Lieutenant Maria Santos watched the Varathi retreat with something like wonder. "We actually did it," she whispered. "We actually won." Admiral Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before returning to the business at hand. Launch the relief ships. Get medical teams and engineers to the surface immediately. The Thessari need our help now, more than ever. On the burning surface of Thesser Prime, Dr. Nathan Cole was already at work. He had come down with the first wave of medical personnel, setting up emergency hospitals in the ruins of what had once been a great city. The devastation was overwhelming, but Nathan had seen disaster before. He knew that the only way to face it was one patient at a time. For 72 hours, he worked without rest. He treated burns and crush injuries and radiation sickness. He performed surgery in conditions that would have been considered impossible on Earth. He saved lives that should have been beyond saving, and he never once asked whether his patients had voted for or against humanity. Young Nasari doctors worked alongside him, learning techniques that human medicine had developed over centuries. They watched this strange, soft creature from a primitive world perform miracles with steady hands and quiet words. "Why?" one of them asked during a brief break. "Why did you come to help us?" Nathan thought about the question carefully. Because someone had to, and because being good to others should not depend on whether they are good to us first. 3 days after the battle, High Counselor Vethrin was brought before Admiral Hayes. The insectoid leader looked diminished, his carapace dull and cracked, his movements slow and uncertain. The confidence that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by something that might have been shame. "Why?" he asked. "After everything we did? After we abandoned your colony? After we treated your people with contempt for a century? Why did you save us?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. He thought about all the friends he had lost, all the sacrifices humanity had made, all the times they had been dismissed and ignored and betrayed. "Because we could," he said finally. "Because we had the power to help, and refusing to use it would have made us something less than we wanted to be." You asked us once what made humanity special. This is your answer. We help because we can, not because we expect anything in return. Vethrin bowed his head. We were wrong about your species. Profoundly wrong, yes, you were. Hayes stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the scarred surface of Thesser Prime. But that does not mean we were perfect either. We should have demanded equality sooner. We should have walked away before our people had to die to prove we deserved respect. What happens now? Now we rebuild, but not the way things were before. The old council is dead. Something new will take its place, or the Varathi will return and finish what they started. Hayes turned back to face the High Counselor. The choice belongs to all of us, together. A week later, Ambassador Katie Morgan arrived to begin the most important negotiations of her career. The signing ceremony took place on Haven Station. Exactly 3 years after Katie Morgan had walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, it was a deliberate choice. Haven existed outside the old boundaries of council space, in territory that humanity had claimed and developed during their years of isolation. Here, in a place built by human hands, a new order would be born. Representatives from 52 species filled the Great Hall. Some had traveled for weeks to attend. Others had barely survived the journey, their ships damaged by Varathi, raiders, or mechanical failures. But they had come, all of them, because they understood that this moment would shape the future of everything they knew. Katie Morgan stood at the central podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. She recognized many faces. The Thessari delegation, led by a humbled Vethrin and a thoughtful representative Sale. The Mondari survivors, their silver skin still bearing scars from the war. The Kelvoth, who had lost half their territory but still stood proud. And dozens of others. Species great and small, powerful and weak, all gathered together for the first time as true equals. 3 years ago, Katie began. Her voice clear and steady, I stood before the Galactic Council and announced that humanity was leaving. I was angry that day. Angry that our people had been abandoned to die. Angry that a century of service and sacrifice had earned us nothing but contempt. She paused, letting the words settle into the silence. I'm not angry anymore. Anger burns too hot to sustain, and we have had to be cold and calculating to survive. But I have not forgotten why we left, and I hope that none of you have forgotten either. High Counselor Vethrin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Katie noticed, but continued without acknowledgement. 8. The old council failed because it was built on a foundation of inequality. Some species mattered more than others. Some voices were heard, while others were ignored. When crisis came, the powerful protected themselves and left the weak to suffer. That is not unity. That is empire, wearing the mask of cooperation. She looked directly at the Thessari delegation. We do not blame any single species for what happened. The system itself was broken, and all of us were shaped by it. Humanity learned to be submissive, to accept less than we deserved, to be grateful for scraps from the table. Other species learned to take our contributions for granted, to see us as useful but not essential, valuable but not equal. Katie lifted a document from the podium. It was a simple thing, paper and ink in an age of digital records, but some moments demanded the weight of physical reality. This is the new compact. It was not written by humans alone. Representatives from every species present contributed to its creation. We argued and debated and compromised until we found words that all of us could accept. She began to read. The gathered species of the galaxy hereby establish a new alliance based upon the following principles. First, that all member species possess equal voice in matters of governance. No species shall hold permanent power over others. No species shall be dismissed as less worthy of protection or respect. Second, that mutual defense shall be absolute and binding. An attack upon any member species is an attack upon all. No exceptions. No calculations of cost and benefit. No acceptable losses. Third, that the resources and knowledge of the alliance shall be shared freely among all members. What benefits one shall benefit all. What threatens one shall concern all. Fourth, that disputes among member species shall be resolved through dialogue and arbitration, never through force or coercion. We bind ourselves to peaceful resolution of our differences, no matter how long or difficult the process may be. Katie set down the document. These principles may seem obvious. They may seem like things that should have been true all along, and perhaps they should have been, but they were not. The old council gave lip service to equality while practicing hierarchy. It spoke of mutual defense while abandoning those it deemed expendable. It claimed to share knowledge while hoarding power. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes of every color and shape. We can do better. We must do better. Because the Varathi are still out there, and they are not the only threat we will face. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, and none of us are strong enough to survive it alone. Admiral Daniel Hayes watched from the gallery above, Maria Santos standing beside him. His hair had gone completely gray over the past 3 years, but his eyes still held the fire that had carried him through impossible battles. Do you think it will work? Maria asked quietly. Hayes considered the question. I think it will be tested, constantly. There will be betrayals and failures and moments when everyone wants to give up. The old ways of thinking will not disappear overnight. That is not really an answer, sir. No, it is not. Hayes allowed himself a small smile. But I have learned that certainty is overrated. What matters is that we keep trying, keep building, keep believing that something better is possible. That is what makes us human, Lieutenant. Not our technology or our tactics. Our stubborn refusal to accept that things cannot change. Below, the signing was beginning. One by one, representatives approached the central table to add their names to the new compact. Some signed with confidence, others with visible reluctance. But all of them signed. Dr. Nathan Cole watched from among the medical contingent. Beside him sat the young Mandari female he had saved 2 years ago. She had recovered fully and had returned to her people, only to request assignment to the human medical course. She wanted to learn, she said. She wanted to help, as she had been helped. Is this really the end of the war? She asked. Nathan shook his head. No, the Varathi will return eventually, and even without external threats, there will be conflicts and disagreements. Peace is not a destination. It is a practice, something we have to work at every single day. That sounds exhausting. It is, Nathan smiled. But it is also the only thing worth doing. Building something, caring for something, protecting something larger than yourself. That is what gives life meaning. Katie Morgan finished the ceremony with words that would be remembered for generations. We do not know what the future holds. We cannot predict every challenge we will face or every decision we will have to make. But we know this. We are stronger together than apart. We are wiser when we listen to voices different from our own. We are braver when we face danger side by side. Humanity did not come back to the galaxy to rule it or to serve it. We came back because this is our home too. And we want to help build something worthy of all the beings who live here. Something our children and grandchildren will be proud to inherit. Today we begin that work. Tomorrow we continue it. And every day after that, for as long as it takes. Until the galaxy is not a place of fear and division, but a community of equals. She paused. Looking out at the assembled delegates one final time, the old council asked, what made humanity special? We could never answer that question, because we were asking it wrong. We are not special because we are better than others. We are special because we refuse to believe that being better matters. What matters is what we do, how we treat each other. Whether we choose kindness over cruelty and hope over despair. That is our gift to the galaxy. Not our technology. Not our soldiers. Our stubborn, impossible, irrational belief that tomorrow can be better than today. She stepped back from the podium, and the hall erupted into applause. Not the polite, measured applause of diplomatic functions, but something genuine, something released after years of tension and suffering. Outside the viewports of Haven Station, ships from a dozen different species drifted in careful formation. Human vessels flew alongside the Sari cruisers and Mandari transports and Kelvoth freighters. They were not yet comfortable with each other. Trust would take time to build, but they were there, together, facing the endless stars, and that was a beginning.